as I mentioned, Representative Hooper was chairman of governmental operations appropriations. Peter Nair is vice chairman of two committees, chairman of another. I'm not chairman of any committee, but I am the majority whip of the Florida House. And I got given a choice of assignments when I first was brought into the Speaker's office at the beginning of our term. And I chose this position because I felt it would get me in the room when some of the key discussions were being held. And I discovered very quickly why they say the majority whip should never file bills of his own and he should never serve on any committees. It's because by the time you get to day 60, if you're not in the hospital, you're pretty close because you're exhausted. The majority whip gets run ragged. If you've ever tried to herd cats, you understand what trying to keep 34 freshmen in the fold is like, much less, another 46 very, very opinionated and strong personalities. Trying to keep them in the room, keep them focused. But it's been a real delight and a real joy, and I have thoroughly enjoyed doing it. There are a couple of points I want to touch on. One is I did request a committee. I requested healthcare appropriations because I wanted to be involved in the Medicaid reform project that we undertook this year. You will see where we're forcing people into things. We don't force anybody in Medicaid to do anything. Medicaid is a gift we give to the people of the state of Florida, and if you don't want it, you don't have to take it. But the federal requirements, as Representative Hooper said, are eating us alive financially. And so we had to make some reforms, and we have instituted what we believe are some very serious-minded and long-term, far-reaching reforms that we think will allow us to deliver health care to our neediest citizens, those who cannot care for themselves, and allow us to do it efficiently, effectively, and most importantly, cost-effectively, so that we can afford it without breaking the taxpayer's wallet open to get more money. One of the things that we focused on doing this term also is funding what we call the APD, the Agency for Persons with Disabilities. These are our most vulnerable, developmentally disabled children and adults who are so seriously disabled they cannot care for themselves. And we had a significant deficit in that area to cover, and we have started instituting what are called I-budgets, and some very specifically individually targeted programs to care for these people so that we don't end up spending a huge fortune that we can't afford. If we give open-ended budgets to people, they tend to think the money's free and they go spend it. So we are trying to do some things that will help keep that under control, but at the same time, care for those who cannot care, truly cannot care for themselves. The other reason I wanted to be involved in health care is the pill mill problem. Florida was the pill mill capital of the country. It was a horrible reputation. We all flinched when we heard it. But it was a major, major problem. We had charter buses carrying people from other states to come line up outside our pill mills with wads of cash, buy hundreds of oxycodone and things like that, take it back on the bus to Kentucky or wherever they came from, and they were basically the drug dealer expresses. And that's what was happening in Florida. We have put a stop to that. As Representative Nair mentioned, doctors are not going to be able to dispense from their offices anymore for controlled substances. You can still prescribe if you have a patient who needs it, and they can take it to a legitimate pharmacy. And we've taken steps to guarantee that there is that arm's length transaction there. And I want to thank the pharmacy folks in Pinellas County who talked openly and freely with me and gave me their input on how best to handle that process, because the bill changed a great deal all the way through session as more and more people had input, and it really became a great work product. That is going to make Florida a totally different destination for drug dealers. They're going to hear jail cells, not office doors opening. Jail cells will be closing, the office doors will be We also passed something that is kind of traditional in Florida. We always have a traditional back-to-school sales tax holiday. And while we don't have as long a one as we would all have liked, there will be a sales tax holiday for folks who are buying school clothes and school supplies this coming August. And there are two other topics I want to touch on. One of them was not sponsored by a Republican. It was sponsored by Darrell Roussan, a Democrat from South Pinellas, who, at the risk of getting quoted, would quite frankly probably rather be a Republican. He sponsored a bill that expanded the drug court program in Florida, and he had our 100% support on that, because we know now that drug courts work. Drug courts take people who are addicted and make sure that their program of either incarceration and treatment, or the treatment and incarceration, whichever it needs to be, gets done effectively and individually. And we have found that the recidivism rate has gone down dramatically there. So we're making real progress on that front, as difficult a problem as the drug issue is. The second item I'd like to address head up before we get to questions is the St. Petersburg Times has had a columnist and several editorials and several little blurbs and news articles that say the leadership in the House and Senate have basically sold themselves, that they can now gather unlimited amounts of cash and spend it any way they want in their so-called leadership funds. Let me take you back in history a little bit. There was a day when the Republican Party chairman of Florida spent money with impunity. Didn't matter who raised it, he spent it the way he wanted to do it. There was a bill passed in the legislature that said the chairman's not going to get to do that anymore. He has to consult with the Senate, leader of the Senate, and the leader of the House in each respective party, because we were embarrassed, quite frankly. And we wanted to make sure it didn't happen anymore. Well, that bill got vetoed by the governor, who was trying to protect his party chairman. And so this year we overrode that veto. But let me tell you right now what we did, because it's not what you read in the newspaper. The funds are what are called affiliated party funds. They're still Republican Party of Florida funds, but they're segregated. And if you're the president of the Senate and you raise Republican Party funds for Senate races, they're going to get spent on Senate races. It's going to be very transparent. Everybody's going to know that the money that goes into that fund can only be spent on Senate campaigns, and it will be reported just like any other party fund. But it'll be under the control of the Senate president. The same will be true in the House. What it means is that you'll never have another Jim Greer go spending your money willy-nilly. And I want you to hear that from us up front, because what you're reading in the newspaper just isn't true. It's not unlimited. It still falls under the same restrictions that the party has. None of the Chapter 106 guidelines for raising money have changed any in regard to what you can and can't give to the party. It's all the same. What we have done is we've injected House and Senate leadership into the party activities to make sure that we don't have a repeat of that embarrassment. Now, raising money is kind of the dark side of politics, they say, because everybody hates raising money, not the least of us up here, I can assure you. It's tough to do, it's hard to do, but it's a necessity, because if we don't, then the only organ out there to carry our message is the St. Pete Times. Now somehow, I don't think they're a friendly messenger for us. So we're going to have to do it. But I will tell you, it will be transparent, it will be open to everybody, it will be open just as all the party funds, if not more so now, because you're going to know where that money goes, and you know it's going to be spent right, because the rest of the House and Senate members are watching their leadership to make sure the money they help raise gets spent right. But that's the truth about what the St. Pete Times calls leadership funds. We do not want another embarrassment like Jim Greer, because we Republicans are better than that. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you.